Tonight, protesters are calling for the arrest of a prominent Democratic donor, Ed Buck, after a second man turned up dead inside his West Hollywood apartment. Now, detectives are trying to find out exactly how a man died inside Buck's home early today.
Just 18 months ago, another man died in Buck's same apartment from a drug overdose. CBS 2's Tom Witt, live in West Hollywood, where protesters expressed their anger tonight. Tom?
Yeah, that's right, Jeff and Pat. A lot of anger out here, and that's because Ed Buck is a free man, and those protesters gathered just outside of his apartment building, the same building where that man was found dead this morning. Community activists unleashing their fury outside Ed Buck's West Hollywood apartment building. The crowd gathered here less than 24 hours after a second African-American man died after being inside Buck's apartment.
If this was a black man and there were two white bodies found in his apartment, there is no way that he would not be in the jail right now, lawyering up.
The man who died this morning after being taken from Buck's apartment has not been identified, and we do not know the cause of death. Buck, a well-known political activist, came under fire less than 2 years ago in the summer of 2017 after Jamel Moore died of a drug overdose that happened in Buck's apartment. Buck was investigated but not charged.
2 black men have been found dead in his house. Is it going to take a third one?
At one point, the crowd turned on Buck's neighbors, accusing them of not doing enough to stop the deaths.
I'm not okay with people dying in his house and people not, and people like coming over here and dying. I'm like, doesn't matter what color skin they have.
Buck's attorney says the man who died here this morning was one of Buck's longtime friends. He says Buck was sober and he didn't give any drugs to the man who passed away.
This is not a situation where Mr. Buck has caused the death. This is a situation where Mr. Buck has had longtime friends who unfortunately do not handle their life well.
At this point, it's not clear if Buck will face any charges. The DA's office has the case, and the sheriff is still investigating. Reporting live in West Hollywood, I'm Tom Waite, CBS 2 News.
Tom, thank you. Well, still no agreement tonight between the teachers union and the LAUSD, which means a strike could happen. CBS 2's Hermela Aragawi is live in downtown LA with new details. Hermela.
Good evening, Pat. Well, right now, both sides are saying that the other has to come a lot further before they reach an agreement. Just a few hours ago, UTLA and LAUSD had press conferences here separately, and at times they contradicted each other so much you wondered if they came out of the same negotiation.
We were surprised today that the district came in with so little to offer.
A day of negotiations ends in a stalemate, with the teachers union scoffing at the school district's proposal and the district pointing the finger at UTLA's unwillingness to actually negotiate.
The UTLA offer on class size and money is the same offer that's been on the table since April of 2017, unchanged.
LAUSD says it's offering a 6% salary increase with no contingencies, but the union says the agreement cuts health care benefits for future employees.
Which is not a good idea when you've got a teacher shortage.
Then there's the issue of class sizes. The union says the district is raising it to 39 students per class in elementary schools and 46 students per class in secondary schools. But the district says they're reducing class sizes by 4 students per class in 75 elementary schools and 15 middle schools with highest needs, and that it's using all the money in its budget to make these changes.
We don't believe a strike will produce more money to reduce class size. We don't believe a strike is going to produce more money to increase a wage.
And then there's the issue of charter schools.
We've addressed as far as we can the issues of charter.
But the union says
if we don't address it, then this school district is gonna potentially face being dismantled by the unregulated growth of charters.
Also a question is whether the union can strike. LAUSD is making the argument that legally they can't without giving more notice. So tomorrow the union is headed to court to secure that right, and on Wednesday both sides will come together again in a last-ditch effort to come to an agreement. Reporting live in downtown LA, Hermela Aragawi, CBS 2 News.
Hermela, thank you for the update. Breaking news now. Police in Long Beach are searching for a driver who hit and killed a pedestrian and then just kept going. It happened on Paramount Boulevard, just north of South Street. So officers are out there now. They're looking for any security camera footage of that collision.
And more breaking news, this time in Compton. LA Sheriff's deputies came across what they thought was a car crash on North Wilmington Avenue. Turns out it was a deadly shooting. They found one man shot inside a car this afternoon. Detectives say as many as 3 men were seen running away from the scene. The area is still closed off tonight as they search for evidence.
Much of Torrance is still reeling from a deadly shooting at the Gable House bowling alley. Tonight, loved ones honored 3 victims and reacted to the arrest of the suspected gunman. CBS 2's Jeff Nguyen is live in Torrance at what has become a growing memorial. Jeff.
And Jeff and Pat, that memorial right behind us did grow during a vigil for the victims, and their families tell us that they gained some comfort in learning that an arrest was made about 30 hours after the triple murder. Tonight, Angeline Hubbard held her grandson Princeton as tightly as she could.
Why do you tell a 5-year-old that his daddy is not coming back?
Princeton's dad, 28-year-old Robert Meekins, was one of 3 men killed Friday night when gunfire erupted at Gable House Bowl in Torrance. This afternoon, police announced they arrested 47-year-old Reginald Wallace in Los Angeles for the murders. They say Wallace was on parole after serving 17 years for assault with a deadly weapon.
I'm proud of the police. I'm so grateful.
Cell phone video captured a massive brawl that police say started between 2 people, then grew to more than a dozen. Police say between security video and witness testimonies, they believe Wallace pulled a handgun out of his pocket, then fired at the crowd.
I do not know who no Reginald Wallace is.
The mother of 28-year-old Aston Edwards, who was the second victim, says her son died in his cousin's arms.
I'm glad my son wasn't here by himself to die.
The third victim was 20-year-old Michael Bradford. The families say the 3 victims were friends whose memories were honored during a vigil tonight in which little Princeton helped to raise money for their services.
He was my favorite daddy, and I love him.
Stop this violence, because we're not going to get anywhere with this.
4 other men were injured. Police say that Reginald Wallace was the only shooter. Tonight, he is being held at LA County Jail with no bail. Live in Torrance, Jeff Nguyen, CBS 2 News.
Thank you, Jeff. Now, opening statements in a case of quadruple murder in San Bernardino, and the victims were a family of 4. Charles Merritt is charged in the deaths of the McStay family. They vanished in 2010. Prosecutors say he killed his former business associate, Joseph McStay, his wife, and their 2 young children. And they say the motive was greed.
The man who, while claiming to be Joseph's best friend, was forging checks from Joseph's business and taking money from him, putting his hands in the cookie jar.
You're going to hear the DNA testing that was done by the defense, which excludes Chase Merritt. And why the prosecution doesn't even touch on that is beyond me.
Investigators say Merritt used a sledgehammer to kill the family, then buried their bodies in the Mojave Desert north of Victorville.
Disgraced actor Kevin Spacey appeared in a Massachusetts courtroom accused of groping a teenage boy. Spacey wanted to skip today's hearing, but the judge was having none of that. He ordered the award-winning actor to be there in person. The judge told the 2-time Oscar winner not to have any contact with his accuser. Spacey is charged with indecent assault and battery for allegedly groping an 18-year-old busboy at the Club Car restaurant in 2016. His lawyers entered a not guilty plea on his behalf. Even though Spacey was ordered to be at today's hearing, the judge said that the actor could actually skip the next hearing coming up in March.
Tomorrow, the partial shutdown of the federal government will enter its 18th day, and there's no deal in sight. The president is threatening to declare a national emergency to get funding for his border wall. But Democratic leaders want to reopen the government before any further discussion of border security. An estimated 800,000 federal employees remain furloughed or are working without pay. And a reminder, President Trump will talk to the nation about the border tomorrow night, and we will carry his address at 6 p.m. right here on CBS 2.
Gavin Newsom was sworn in today as California's 40th governor, and it was an inauguration like no other. This is how it started, the energetic voices of destiny out of Compton. Newsom launched into his inaugural address after taking the oath of office, but the new governor was upstaged a little bit by his youngest son, Josh. The 2-year-old marched right onto the stage during his dad's speech. So, with Josh in his arms, Newsom used the moment to stoke a national debate.
But all kids, not just the children of a governor and a filmmaker, should have a good life in California. Should be ripped away from their parents at the border.
Newsom also named a long list of serious problems facing our state that he plans to address as governor, including, he says, homelessness.
Some street closures near LAX tonight that you need to know about. Caltrans is closing the northbound 405 on and off ramps at Century Boulevard and the 405 southbound on and off ramps at Manchester Boulevard. Closures are expected to last until Friday.
Life-saving delivery taken right off a local woman's porch, caught on camera. Thousands of dollars in cancer medication swiped.
And a violent fight caught on camera inside this Moreno Valley McDonald's. Still ahead, it all started when a mother asked a couple of teenagers to leave the kids' playground.
And a crash ending caught on camera. See the wild pursuit that ends with a bang.
Hey everybody, I'm Garth Kemp. Nice day today. More rain on the way. We'll tell you all about it coming up.